Good afternoon, everyone. Oh my goodness, it's so nice to be here and see you all here. I know that's what old people say. Doesn't matter. All right, welcome to Federation Hall, everybody. Most of you haven't met me. I'm David Sequeira. I'm the director of the Fiona and Sydney Meyer Gallery, and we'll talk about that later today because there's an opening at 5 p.m. tonight and you'll all be welcome. But my job today is, well, you'll get to know me throughout the year because I'm the person that has the privilege of organising Art Forum. And Art Forum takes place every Thursday during semester at 12:15 right here. And the magic of Art Forum is that every week we get to hear a leading artist talk about their practice. And in all the years I've been running artist talks, and I've literally run thousands of artist talks, there's something about artists talking to fellow artists that's very magical. So if you're in first year, a huge welcome to you. We look forward to bonding with you through Art Forum every week. And if you're in second or third year, or if you're one of our postgrads, a huge welcome back to you. So before I introduce our guest speaker, I do want to take a moment and invite you to join me in acknowledging that long before the Victorian College of the Arts was thought of or the University of Melbourne was considered, that the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation practiced song and dance here. They made pictures, they made sculptures, they shared stories, they practiced healing. And those rituals continue today. And it's really with joy and honour that we get to do what we get to do on this country. So our guest speaker today is a guest of the Drawing and Printmaking Department here at the VCA. His name is Heman Chong. He was born in Malaysia and he's based in Singapore. He's an artist whose work is located at the intersection between image, performance, situations, and writing. Heman's practice can be read as an imagining, interrogation, and sometimes intervention into infrastructure as an everyday medium of politics. His work has been the subject of solo exhibitions at STPI, Het New Institute, Weissenberg Museum, Jameel Art Centre, Swiss Institute New York, Art in General, Rockbund Art Museum, South London Gallery, amongst many others. Heman is also the co-director and founder with Renee Stahl of the Library of Unread Books, a library made up of donated books previously unread by their owners. Whether you are in Zoom land or whether you're here with us in Federation Hall, please join me in making Heman very welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending this lecture. I'm going to read off my phone so I'm not on Instagram or something. My name is Heman, and I've been existing as an artist for the past 20 years in a sort of relative dispersed manner. And I don't believe in sort of developing any form of fixed identity or signature. And I would employ different methods of production across different projects. So in a way, you can say that it is almost impossible to think about my practice as a thing, but a stack of different things. This is a work which consists of a sentence that I've appropriated off the pages of Wikipedia and have designed it and installed it in real space. It is a disclaimer that you would find on pages that contains lists that are consistently being updated. I feel very strongly that my practice can be more or less seen in this manner, that it will forever be a dynamic list and will never be able to satisfy anyone's need for completeness. So within this dynamic incompleteness, I've identified 3 threads that I would like to talk about today. They are, number 1, how to live. Number 2, infrastructures. Number 3, fictions. With each thread, I will use a couple of words that I've made to describe these motives. Part 1, how to live. This is a series of works that I make quietly and without any drama within my bedroom in the flat that I sleep in Singapore. It is important that that work is made in the same space as I sleep, because it's also the same space as I read. In fact, this first piece, one that I made in my bedroom in Berlin back in 2003, was completely an accident. I woke up one morning and Dad was just staring at me. Apparently, I had unconsciously been stacking up these books that I've been reading and these glasses that I've been drinking from, one on top of the other. The title of the series is something quite banal. It is just simply called Stacks. And in fact, at the end of the day, a stack is a stack of things, a gathering of found objects, even if it's done with a lot of care and attention. After making the first piece, I have decided that in order to resist the next stacks from being totally banal, I would only be allowed to make one stack a year. So I would take a year to think about which books become a part of this stack, and also that the glasses that I use in the work, that they are glasses that I would drink from the entire year. So the work is quite simply autobiographical. It produces a portrait of myself in that year, and it's very similar to somehow like writing a diary. The stacks are often shown in a way that somehow introduces them as fragile objects, almost like fragile weeds that would grow on the side of the streets in cities across the region where I live, which is in Southeast Asia. There have been many moments when someone would totally just walk into the work and then it breaks. And when the work breaks, I would just spend another year sort of drinking from the different glasses, and the work gets remade and conserved in this way. But of course, this is only possible when I'm alive. We are surrounded by things that are made of paper. So much of our lives are mediated through paper documents, paper packaging, books, waste. Within the realm of art and culture, our relationship to paper revolves around inscribing on paper words and images, and later on, learning how to preserve these and conserve them for a future generation. My interest in paper began early in my other life as a graphic designer. For graphic designers, it is the very concept of paper is different from that when an artist sort of works with paper. Well, at least for me, for a graphic designer, the possibility of touching paper is so much more heightened, you know. And that intimacy with paper is something that I've always been obsessed with since the very beginning of my life as an artist. This is a work that I've made in 2008, and it's the first work that sort of encapsulates my relationship with paper as a material really, really well. It has a ridiculously bombastic title, which is kind of a title that polarizes audiences. You either like or hate it. The title of the work is Monument to the People We've Conveniently Forgotten, a parenthesis, I hate you. Made from randomly discarding 1 million business cards on the floor of a given space, the work is relentless and unavoidable, colonizing the entire space. The audience is allowed to touch the cards or take them or do whatever they want with them. Even the sheer act of standing on the cards feels transgressive. The transgression becomes the basis of a physical relationship between an individual and the work, which is then reinforced when you're able to touch the work and do whatever you want with it. It is important for me as an artist to not tell anyone what they can or cannot do with the work. There are no instructions. The work does not resist destruction. Sometimes curators would show the work along other artists, and I would often feel terrible about it because the work would consume the space and the other works along with it. The business card, especially in East Asia, is a cultural object. It is a representation of one's identity and status in society. And to have 1 million business cards haphazardly thrown around the floor can be sometimes culturally very shocking for someone from that region. It has the potential to speak about all the failed connections and relationships found in our lives. And it's ultimately a work about loneliness, alienation, and abandonment. At the end of the show, the paper is constantly recycled and the work temporarily disappears. There's also something about the work that's important, which is that there's a very open brief when a curator shows it. So they could, for example, like this installation was really much more about the artist who curated the show, who is Christian Botansky. So he's decided he just could not deal with my work. And he just sort of like tried to stuff it into a cupboard, which I thought was hilarious, So some curators would think that it's too much to have it in an entire gallery, would try and like make a mountain of it. This is installed by Hans-Erik Obrist. And this was in the permanent collection of M+ in Hong Kong, where they had found like a window. And because most works cannot be near sunlight, and because the work doesn't resist destruction, so it could be, literally like shone on the whole time. The next work is a work that deals with paper as a material, but it's not immediately apparent because of all the layers of complexities involved in the project. At the heart of the work is a collection of thousands and thousands of books, which we all know are made from paper. The Library of Unread Books is an artist-run space functioning as a public library. It is run by Renee Stahl and I, and we started it back in 2016 in Singapore at NTU CCA, the Center for Contemporary Art, during a residency. So we transformed our studio space into a library because we thought that it would be nice that the residency becomes a kind of open-ended space for other artists while we're on residency. So we would share the space. So like lots of artists would have meetings and, like just hang out in our studio. And that the public library becomes sort of a site for that. So our cheesy motto is that if you have a book you haven't read, donate it to us and someone else will read it for you. Each book in the Library of Unread Books was previously private property, and it's a very simple way of transforming it into an object that belongs to the public commons. The books in our collection should be touched, smelled, and of course read. There's no system of arranging the books. They're again stacked on top of each other and placed on tables. It's important that the books are on tables and not on shelves, because I think it's so much more welcoming to people to like pick up the books from the different stacks, and that the library has a chance to develop its own life in how it becomes different for every viewer, because then the position of the books shift all the time. Whenever it is possible, it is also important for us that the furniture used in the library are also furniture that's found within the institution that is shown in, and that if we couldn't get like furniture within the institution, that we would go to a secondhand shop to buy like cheap old furniture. So the whole space is really about sort of like reusing things, The library is constantly rearranged by the readers. We are precious about our collection, as a sharing of ideas and spaces. What we are not precious about are the books as physical or cultural commodity. So for example, we have this rule, which is that if a book is stolen from the library, it remains a book from our library. It's just sitting on someone else's shelf. If a book collapses from use, we will repair it until it cannot be read any longer, and then we'll recycle it. We insist that our library functions like an appetite that grows on the surfaces of other institutions. So like we will never like open shop somewhere and make our own library in a given space. It always infiltrates an institution, whether it's like a small broom closet or on a like lobby spaces are very popular for the library because it brings in people. So we really hope that actually we will seduce these cultural institutions into dreaming of producing common spaces for people to gather and common tools for people to utilize and ways of working that doesn't exhaust common resources and in turn exhaust the possibility of community. In the recent iteration of the Library of Unread Books at Islands, an independent art space in Singapore, we encountered a ferocious reader of espionage novels named John Lee. Over the course of 4 weekends, he has consistently showed up to read any and everything we can dig up for him within the genre. He works as a night guard at a condominium in Singapore. He doesn't care about any other kind of books. We tried to sort of like, introduce art books to him and just like would not read it. Sometimes we see him quietly sitting with a stack of books that he has salvaged from his day job as a guard, and that he will be donating all these books to our library because he doesn't read them. And we discovered that he often just comes straight from work. So like mostly we talk, but he just reads and gives books. He has no understanding of the library as an art project. He doesn't care for it to be art or anything. He's just merely there to be able to read spy novels for free. Sometimes, we will offer him coffee. And so it becomes a very social thing, very intimate and personal. And that it's kind of something that is very important for us at the Library of Unread Books, that there's always something for everyone at the Library of Unread Books. In a way, it sort of dovetails into the next section of my talk, which is about infrastructures. Infrastructure is essentially made up of the components of the built world around us. It is mostly in reference to stuff found in public space, things like roads, highways, lifts, buildings, fire escapes, buses, and reservoirs. I am deeply interested in systems that surround us that are not immediately apparent or visible to the naked eye. These secrets within our infrastructures are cracks and slippages that are placed there in order to facilitate informal exchanges that are sometimes not possible to stage because of bureaucracy or just petty politics. This is a door. This is another door. And another. And another. Since 2018, I've been collecting these images of back entrances of embassies in every city that I visit. These are doors that are in plain sight and are often completely ignored and overlooked, and often unmarked. I spoke to a friend who works in an embassy, and she told me that these back doors have multiple pragmatic uses. Number one, for delivery of food, mostly, for members of the ambassador to enter and exit without hassle, but also for things that happen in the shadows, which I promised never to talk about. These back doors fascinate me because they represent everything in politics that is unsaid, invisible, and sinister. They are gateways to secret and lies. It is interesting to see how unassuming and unglamorous these back doors have such a useful purpose to them. And I love this air of mystery. I decided to not be, like an investigative journalist when I'm working on this project. And I've chosen not to reveal which back door belongs to which embassy in whatever city that I'm uncovering, just to allow for the images to remain completely veiled and inaccessible, like a curtain. I've also chosen to force a viewer to see the image many times around, as if He or she is a figure of surveillance, forever watching these passages. The title of the series is called Foreign Affairs. The images can be repeated on different surfaces, panels, curtains, magazine covers, any and everything that can be surfaced. It's a bit like a stock image, you know, that I could sort of manipulate over time and space. This next work is a sign that is installed by my local council in the estate where I live in Singapore. It is absolutely the most fascist thing I've ever seen, ever written on a sign. I hate it so much that I love it, and I've decided to appropriate it as one of my works. It is infrastructure at its most revealing, most cruel, and most absurd state. It is the opposite of everything that I believe in. I don't ever want to tell people how to think, how to look at my work, and what to do with my work. And I choose to install it within exhibitions that often speak about ideas behind community, relation building, you know, like stuff like that. And people often find this sign extremely shocking, thinking that I had written it, but actually I didn't. And I do agree with them, of course. The next part of my talk deals with fictions and what is fiction? What roles do storytelling play in our society? How does it affect our individual lives? I've always been interested in the law and how we interpret about what something is legal or not. In fact, legality is a kind of fiction, a bunch of people in power who wrote the rules that define how we live and how we act. This is a work called Legal Bookshop. It is a collaboration with the sci-fi writer, this guy, Ken Liu. He's also a lawyer, and he's most famous for translating a very famous novel that's written in China called The Three-Body Problem by Liu Cixin. And so I kind of hired Ken as a lawyer and not as a writer or translator or whatever. And his role as a lawyer is for him to come up with a list of books that he thinks that I could circumvent the legal system of China with. So it's a non-profit bookshop. We are selling books for the price that we bought them. And this is only possible within an art project. It's the worst business model ever. Again, the work is temporary. It disappears after the exhibition. And the exhibition is also, for me, thought of as a fictional space. So it's super interesting to see how, you know, he's sort of chosen these books and how his understanding of like legal systems in China is, which then forms a kind of portrait of his resistance to these systems that he works in. So it's kind of like a portrait of Ken Liu, really, about, you know, someone who sort of writes fiction. It's a lawyer. It's also, he kind of, his day job is that he is hired by the state of Boston in America to explain to the court whenever a new technology comes up that the judge cannot understand, you know? So that's very interesting as well for me. Some of his choices are very obvious, like John Grisham, of course, you know, of course. But Susan Sontag, woohoo, you know? I was like, why? But then he explained to me that so much of like the legal processes depend on photography, which is true, right? So I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Like evidence. And there's a lot of science fiction, a lot of Ursula K. Le Guin, of course. And where's the slide? I missed that one slide, but there's also like a kind of Xi Jinping sort of like biography thing, and you know, like what. Anyway, I started writing short stories in 2006, and I began writing fiction as a way of exploring the possibility of making something that requires no money because I was broke. And I was also very exhausted from like running around like a headless chicken trying to apply for funding. Writing is a very hard and tedious process for me, and it remains extremely difficult as we speak. And I do it in order to experience a certain pain that I don't get from making anything else that I've made. painting by comparison comes very naturally to me, and I can deal out colors, lines, shapes, forms, like whatever, without any resistance whatsoever. The opposite holds true for me when it comes to writing. So, but having said that, is something that I would want to do for the rest of my life, not as a way of like perfecting writing, but rather as a way of immersing myself in encountering a persona that's constantly screaming at me in my face. This is a performance that I made back in 2009 as part of a series of performances curated by the French choreographer Boris Kamatz. It represents a moment that when I discovered that the best way of publishing my very, very badly written short stories is to publish it as a performance. And it's something that I've been pursuing because I think it sort of infects my work in a very different way, infects my writing to become more like a script than a short story, which then makes it easier to think about the writing, if that makes sense. So these are stories that are not meant to be read, but stories that are designed to be memorized with the help of a personal trainer. And I like the term personal trainer very much because the experience of memorizing 500 words is akin to be tortured by a trainer in the gym. And you have to sign, it's one of those performances you have to like sign up before you come to the space, because I've had situations when like the partners of people who want to do it get really upset because the partner wants to do it and it took like 3 hours, and I don't want anyone to hate me. So I think it's crucial also because the task is so daunting to memorize something for 3 hours, and that if we had only sort of solicited participants from the walk-in audience, the result is always disastrous. Each story is about 500 words long, and but I can tell you that it's extremely difficult to memorize 500 words today because we've basically externalized all our memories into our devices, and we can't even remember a single phone number. The performance begins when the trainer meets the participant. The trainer doesn't have to memorize the short story. They have the story in their hand, printed on a sheet of paper. The trainer would tell the participant the rules of the performance, that it only ends when they have successfully memorized the short story and is able to speak it back to the performer, the trainer in the verbatim. I've also promised everyone who has taken part in this performance that I will never publish these short stories ever in a book or online. So the only way of accessing these short stories is really through the performance, or you could eavesdrop. So the documentation of this performance always looks ridiculous, which is because it just looks like someone's on a date, you know. You know, I really like it. It's like a book of dates. Like, hey, how's your day? Tinder sucks, you know. So what I've done is to sort of like publish a short story by staging a performative act. So publishing as performance, you know. And the short story enters the receiver in a very intimate way each time. And it is this intimacy that I most crave in my practice, this kind of very short distances with people who receive my work. Thank you very much.
Don't go, come back.
Questions, right?
Well, firstly, on behalf of everyone, just thank you for the extreme generosity and for taking us through just a beautiful career and all of the spaces of your work. Yeah. We do have some time for questions. So if anybody has a question for Heman, yes, straight away, please.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Follow the first step. Cut paste.
But it's so good you asked that question because I had the same question.
It's true. Who has time?
Anyone else with a question?
I have to wear sunglasses. I can't see it because these are prescriptions.
Yeah, please.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a very good exercise. We've gone through like 1,000. So like, is it more evil to ship the crate of like less evil to reprint them like that? So what I've spoken to in college. So we've taken steps. So like the ink we use is actually water soluble and not all these things. So that's one. And ink was always recycled. First, it was I would always use like the worst stock. So that it's like 7 times recycled before. So I really tried to know what the carbon. And for example, also with the light, stop shaking. Every time someone show like books, so that nothing
Any other questions? Yeah, just before we have that question, I've got a request.
Yeah.
I've got a request.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because we've got people on Zoom.
Sorry.
And I'm gonna repeat your question when you ask it. So yes, please.
What?
Say that again.
Any book recommendations?
Yeah, Heman, do you have any book recommendations for our people in
I have
Zoom land?
thousands. What would you like? I'm a very big fan of Rebecca Sloanit, so I think everyone should read Rebecca Sloanit, especially this book called Wanderlust, which is a beautiful history of walking.
Great. Anyone else with a question? Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh.
I'm just going to repeat the question
sure.
for, and I hope I've got it right. It's a question about, work that's made specifically for a gallery that couldn't really be made outside of a gallery. Is that right? And what motivates? Just so I've got it, and what motivates you to make that work for a gallery?
Yeah.
Is that your question?
Like a sale object. Yeah.
Right.
I don't have master plans for my work, and I think I sort of improvise as I go along, and I sort of make things up as I'm making it. So it's a very difficult question for me because sometimes I have good intentions and then they end up in terrible places, and then vice versa, So I think that I guess a very good way to answer your question is that I don't have a fear of failure. I would just fail like publicly in a very embarrassing way sometimes, and that's okay for me. Yeah. And I do believe, just as a personal politic, that I do want to be paid for my work as an artist. So I do make work that is commercially susceptible, let's say. It's like I have a series of work which is like this. I'll just show it to you very, very quickly. I think I have it somewhere. Like this. You see that painting there? So like this series pays everything. in my life. It's my, thing, So I think politically it's important for me to earn money as an artist within my practice. And I try to do it because I think that allows for society to also think about my work as important. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Any more questions? Yes, please.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, every stack begins on January 1st every year and it ends on the 31st of December every year. I was just talking about the conservation of the object because like a lot of the stacks are just like haphazardly shown on the floor somewhere. And I've got curators like giving tours and like backing into it. And then, everything just smashes on the floor. And when that happens, then I just have to like take another year to like drink from the cups and then remake the object. So that stops, the conservation stops when I pass away, but the work technically only is made within a year. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Yeah, please.
Oh, it's always almost the same size like this. It's tiny, it's tiny. No. 2024 is this year, right? I haven't even started thinking, to be honest. I've started reading. I read a lot. So I started thinking like, oh yeah, maybe this book, like that book. And I tell you what, like one thing I do think about is that I try to use like hardcover editions for the stacks. You know why? Because like, if the base is too tiny, it just keeps falling over. So I always like, oh yeah, I mean, like I would like sort of like think about that just as a kind of like structural problem, Yeah. Like this one. There's one that, like this one, I think there's one that broke and there's just like someone walked into it. I think it's this one, someone, because they're just so fragile, It's just also something very invisible at times. Like this, I mean, like this is crazy. You see the stack in the middle of the space. Why would you do that, Yeah.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
The business card works, and you were talking about, you kind of briefly mentioned that artists were a bit upset.
Yeah.
Can you talk about negotiating that space with other artists?
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
Just that image, or even the image before that one.
Yeah.
Just talk about what people were upset about and, how they kind of.
This curator for this show is Kiwi, is Tessa Giblin. I think she got a lot of shit for this because like everyone's like, the floor's too dark, why is there stuff on the floor? But this is okay actually, but this was crazy problematic because it was fighting with the Namjoon Park. So it kind of eats the work and I always feel bad. But this is just my deeply seated insecurities of my fears of abandonment. So it's just personal. Actually, nobody gives a shit really.
So it's just you.
Yeah, it's just me.
It's just you.
Okay. Me. Yeah. Namjoon Park's not gonna roll over from his grave and like curse me or something in Korean.
Have we got any more questions? Yeah. Oh, we've got two. Why don't we have Alex? Why don't we have you first and then we'll come to you, please.
You're welcome. Oh, no. I haven't. Yes, so the first short story that I've written, they all have titles. So the first one is called A Short Story About Geometry. And that it is about two individuals who are locked in a very tragic, sort of toxic geometry of a relationship. So I think a lot of the short stories that I've written are about relations because my work is relational, and they often take the form of a tragic rom-com. It's like Before Sunset for Asians.
I'm just processing tragic rom-com.
Yeah, right.
I think that all rom-coms are tragic.
Yeah, totally.
And there was one more question before we finish. Yes, please.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. You have to. Could you talk a little bit more about your question? I really didn't understand it. Oh, yeah. Oh, I often see myself as a fan more than anything else. I don't have this kind of insecurity about producing immediately after coming into contact with something. You know what I mean? So I'm very happy to just read something and enjoy that material and to sort of sink into that artist's world. And I don't necessarily have this kind of push, to want to like use it or to exploit it. But I think it's important to experience work more than to extract something from another work. You see what I mean? Yeah.
We're gonna leave it there, but really, Heman, just thanks for bringing the energy. Thank you. Well, it's it's like just really generous to be this open and share about a practice that really is like a mountain with no top.
Yeah.
It's so open-ended and it can go in any direction at any time. And there's just a lot of vulnerability and generosity with a practice like that. And I just appreciate you sharing that with our audiences. So please, let's thank Heman one more time.
Thank you for coming.
And actually, Heman, can you go stand there? Let's get you that picture. The picture of you with everybody there. Yeah, just turn. Face. That picture. Right. Okay. And then to everybody here, please don't forget 5 o'clock tonight, Fiona and Sydney Meyer Gallery. We have the opening of Gladys Calaccini's exhibition here. And we really look forward to welcoming you there. There are drinks, there's sushi, there are artists. It's the recipe for fun. We'll see you there tonight. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for coming.